I'm Abrielle Millett for BYU-Idaho Radio, and I'm here today with Dr. Bret Maiers, and he's here to talk about his 3D running gait analysis. But before we kind of get into that, can you tell our audience a little more about yourself and who you are and kind of how you got into this running analysis and kind of where that came from?
Sure. No, thanks for having me here. This is super fun. A little background on me. I've been a physical therapist for 16 years now. I work at the INL, at the Idaho National Laboratory, for the last 6 years. So kind of an interesting place to have a physical therapist. But I treat their employees there. And before that, I practiced in a couple different states. Got my doctorate degree from Eastern Washington University in 2010. I had to think about that for a second. Yeah, it's been kind of a fun journey. I developed a passion for running along the way as I got some training from one of the companies I worked with when I was down in Utah, who had partnered with a running researcher at a University of Wisconsin. And that kind of got me kickstarted into this. And I'm a runner myself. My wife is a runner. She's also a coach. She coaches middle school cross country and track down in Rigby where we live right now. And I've got kids that run, so I'm just kind of surrounded by it. I ran track in college, though I'll have to admit I was a pole vaulter and a long jumper. So my kids said, "Dad, you didn't run." It's like, well, I was a running athlete still. So although I didn't run as far as what you guys do. When you look at that background, I've just been surrounded by it a lot. And that's kind of what's driven me into this.
What has made you consider what it is to run? When you break down any sport, it feels like a lot more complicated than it actually is because, for example, running, like everyone runs, they walk, they're always moving, so you never really think about the way you run.
Right.
I guess that would be a lot more important to a runner or to an athlete because it can kind of probably change your speed and your gait. Why it's important to I guess be aware of your running.
I did a week-long distance running camp for high school and middle school kids, and I did 2 different weeks. So I had 2 different groups, and one of the questions I asked was, name a sport that technique doesn't matter. And one athlete there, he tried to stump me, and he came up with something after talking to a couple of his friends, and in several seconds of thinking, I re-stumped him back. And as we went through that exercise, we can't come up with a sport where technique doesn't matter. I mean, we think of golf. Oh my goodness, technique matters 100% in golf. Football, baseball, how you throw a football or baseball completely matters for accuracy, for injury prevention, for length of distance you're going to try to throw that ball. So we can look at any sport, and technique and focusing on technique and form is a huge component pretty much any sport we do. So why not with running? When you ask that to runners, there's usually a light bulb moment there where it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Why don't I focus on my form and technique to improve, what I'm doing?
I just think it's so interesting because I feel like even running makes up all the different sports. I would say, movement is a big part of any sport. It involves some sort of aspect of speed and movement. When it comes to 3D gait analysis or 3D gait running analysis, can you break that down what that kind of is for me, because I've never done an analysis like this. So I'm just curious about what that entails.
So the 3D gait analysis system that I use, it's a marker-based system, which is currently the gold standard in motion capture technology. You can go onto YouTube and look at videos of, actors and filming of movies like Avatar, Lord of the Rings, right? And you'll see videos, they put actors in special suits and they attach these reflective markers to joints, to body parts. And they have these super expensive camera systems that are tracking those actors' movements in space. And so this is the exact same technology. This is just on a tripod behind a treadmill. There's actually 3 separate cameras back, in this system on the tripod. And so as long as there's at least 2 cameras at any one point in time that can see and track a marker, it generates then a 3D model, and it creates a skeletal model of the runner from the pelvis down. And so these 18 markers go on. One's on the back. We put some on the pelvis. hips, knees, and so on down to the feet. And it then renders after, really there's only 10 seconds worth of running we need to capture with it. And we get an immediate 3D model that's generated that then we can see what is going on. We can rotate in any really kind of plane we want to see what's going on at different joints for that particular runner. And so we get a lot of really just specific data by having this marker-based system. And it's called the Helix 3D system, put out by RunDNA is the company that made it.
You said there's like about 3 cameras that are checking these?
Yeah, so they're like silver dollar size cameras that are kind of in this. It's a big bar that sits on a tripod behind the treadmill, and there's one in the center, about a silver dollar size camera. It's an infrared camera, and then 2, then one on each side. And so they're all angled to look at the treadmill, and they're looking specifically for these reflective markers.
Once you have that information, what does that tell you? Does it tell you maybe issues that the runner might be experiencing? Yes. Or kind of, I know sometimes like my mom has talked about how like, oh, you walk in the inside of your shoes or kind of like that. Uh-huh. And so I imagine you'd realize some of those kind of things.
The system's tracking over 40 to 50 points of data. I mean, with all these markers on there, it's really gathering so much information. And by the time it's done, it coalesces everything into 21 different metrics that we're tracking. And this ranges from how much vertical up and down motion does the runner have? What is their step rate? Like how many steps per minute are they taking? What angle is their foot contacting the ground? Are they really heel striking? Are they really reaching out in front of their body too far? What's their shin angle? Is there any or excessive rotation in their leg bones? Is their pelvis dropping and it's not staying level when they run? So this is all things we can see and actually track with this 3D technology. The benefit of doing this and having that specific data is then we can get specific exercise prescription and running form cues and drills for that runner. And the really fun part about it is, we could have 2, 3, 4 runners come in, and what the system does is it's an algorithm-based system that was developed over years from with RunDNA. Dr. Doug Adams is the developer of the system. Did a lot of military research, and over time really developed some great algorithms in this. And so the system uses those algorithms and it categorizes the runner into specific categories, and it tells us, hey, here's the problem. Here's the running category that they're in. And a couple of categories, for example, would be like a bouncer. Like those are the people that you can see running down the road and they look like a gazelle, just boom, boom, just up and down. And then another common category is what's called an overstrider. It's somebody that reaches out way in front of their body. They have a huge heel strike. Their shin bone is not vertical. It's canted back because they're reaching out in front of them too far. So the system will put people in these categories, and then it tells us, hey, here's their primary factor. Here's their secondary factor as far as why they have this as their running category. And it gives them a score. It gives them an efficiency score. And it's on a percent score system. And so 100% is the best somebody can get. And so if somebody comes in and the system pops up and says, yeah, they're a 68%, like, okay, we have some room for improvement here that we can help this runner out. And so again, to kind of circle back here, what we get from getting those categories, looking at those specific metrics, any number of those 21 metrics, depending on the category that runner is in, that helps us get so specific for that individual runner. And like I said a second ago, you have 3 or 4 runners that maybe fit the same category, but each of those runners might need a different cue or a different drill that resonates with them to get them to where they need to go. And so that's the benefit of the specificity of a 3D gait analysis system like this.
It provides you with a lot of information that you can't fully get. Like you can guess when you see someone run, you can assume, but to be able to get insight in 3D modeling of like what's actually happening and collecting data in that way, it can really, like you said, it can really impact what you can even do or what you can even offer. Who's drawn to this?
Yes. So obviously it's geared towards people who are, endurance distance runners, right? So you're looking at people who are running 5K races to 10K to, marathons, right? Very beneficial for people running even shorter distances, track athletes running your 800 meters, your half mile or your 1600 meters full mile. So very beneficial for them. But really anybody who is a running athlete can massively benefit from this. I mentioned Dr. Doug Adams a minute ago. He's the one that developed this system, and he frequently treats professional level runners, with this system, and he's developed a practice that centers on treating runners. And on a podcast, from a couple years ago, he mentions that about a year before that, he had started seeing NFL athletes, so professional football players, had started to come to him, and these were speed position players, so wide receivers, running backs, free safeties, the guys that really got to move across that field, and getting them on a treadmill, getting the markers on them, get them on the treadmill, slowing down their running, a little slower than what they're used to. But what that does is that starts to expose some of these mechanics that are maybe a little faulty, that they can hide a little bit because they're running so fast when they're doing practices and games, right? But slow down their running, expose those mechanics that are maybe a little faulty, smooth out their mechanics, give them some drills to work on and get that running efficiency score, as high and as good as you can get it. And they're seeing that translates into better running, way more efficient running at the faster speeds that they play and practice at. So not just for endurance runners, but a 3D gait analysis is for really any running athlete.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. What have you seen in this process with like different individuals? Because I feel like, I don't know, the way you move is kind of like the way you move. So I feel like if someone broke down kind of like, oh, you might be doing this a little not as effectively, I feel like I might get a little defensive about my running,
right. Why not do it that way? You're right. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the point that I try to make with runners when they come in and see me is, look, there's not one ideal running gait pattern here. We're trying to get you to be the most efficient version of you and give each specific runner a specific cue or drill that works for them to try to get those mechanics within a little more acceptable ranges to reduce their risk for injury, for one, and two, to help make them more efficient. And so it's really about meeting every runner where they're at and trying to get them, again, to be the most efficient version of themselves.
An analysis that, if anything else, it probably could just point them in the right direction. And, if they put it to the test, they can see how impactful it can be for them.
Yeah. And just to kind of give a little, anecdote here, I guess, for people who are listening, I had a runner come in, and this is the other side of it as far as why what I'm doing I feel is so beneficial for running athletes, and and particularly endurance, distance runners, is I'm not just looking at the running form and mechanics with the 3D system. I'm also doing a mobility assessment. I'm also doing a strength assessment. So I'm seeing how their technique, their mobility, and their strength are all interplaying with each other. And a really good example of that is I saw a runner who, this was going back in the fall, I think, so several months ago, but he was trying to get to semi-pro status. So he was running a 2:32 marathon, which is a sub 6 minute mile for 26 straight miles, which is insanely fast. And he was trying to get under 2:30 to get to semi-pro status. And so he just had 2 minutes to shave off. But boy, when you're running that fast, that is really hard to try to find any bit of a way to improve your time. So got him on the treadmill, got the markers on him, checked him. And luckily beforehand, I had done a mobility and strength assessment. And when I got him on there, I was seeing that one of his hips, and this is the beauty of a marker-based system, is we can track down to the millimeter with this thing. And so I could see one of his hips, he was moving about 2 centimeters different on one hip than the other. So I got him off the treadmill and hey, let's take a look at this hip again. One of those hips was a little tight and stiff when we were looking at it in the mobility assessment. Checked his hip, actually a lot more stiff than I thought. So I spent a little time doing some PT magic stuff to try to loosen up his hip, got him right back on the treadmill, and his score improved immediately by about 6 to 8% right there. And he felt remarkably better. Over the next several weeks, worked with him and continued to improve his efficiency and his score. And he actually texted me several weeks ago and said, "Hey, I ran a 2:28 marathon." Super excited now, semi-pro status, and, just a drop of, 4 minutes was a huge deal for somebody running that fast. But that's a huge testament to show that a big part of efficiency, and when we say efficiency, it's all about preserving energy so that we have more gas in the tank towards the end of our races and runs so that we can utilize it when we need it. And so that just pushed his efficiency far enough the other direction that he was able to maintain faster speeds for a longer period of time during this 26-mile marathon and not be nearly as gassed towards the end so that he could really push towards the time that he wanted. And so it's really a combination of trying to marry mobility, strength, and technique to make somebody the most efficient, energy-saving version of themselves as possible while they're running and doing the things that they want to do.
If someone was to get an appointment or try this out or learn about it more, I guess what would they do, or what would you encourage?
Yeah, so they just reach out to me. So that most people are finding me on like Facebook or Instagram. Stride 3D is the name of the side company that I started that I'm doing on the side, because unless people have a government badge, they're not getting into one of the government buildings at the INL where I do my usual daily job. But they'll usually find me on Instagram or Facebook and just schedule something on Calendly. And when they come in, most people are wanting to do a full assessment where I'm spending 60 to 90 minutes with them. I'm going through some of their history of running, injury history, a little bit of a look at, sleep habits, nutrition, some of these other outside things that can really impact performance. And so we go through that stuff and then take time to do a mobility screen where we're checking flexibility, mobility, and then a strength assessment before we even marker them up and get them on the treadmill. And then we're getting them on and off the treadmill 4, 5, 6 times and the captures on the 3D system, it only takes about 10 seconds. So I get them up and let them run for a couple minutes, and then I do a 10-second recording, and then within 10 seconds, the system has generated the 3D model. And so then we'll get them on and off the treadmill, work on different cues, work on different drills, and get them back on right away, re-record and say, okay, did that positively or negatively affect your efficiency score? And either direction gives us information on what we need to do or not do with that runner. And so that's kind of a quick overview of what a session looks like. We try to cover in about 60 to 90 minutes of just one-on-one time to be as specific and individualized as possible for that person.
I guess what would you say to maybe those who are runners or even not runners? Why is it important to be aware of your movement and your health in this way, at least?
I like to use the word efficiency with runners and why it's important to be aware of how you run, because if you can be more efficient, you're going to use less energy during that time that you're running. And so you're going to be able to, again, push yourself that last lap of your mile race on the track, right? And you're going to have more energy. What if you want to run a marathon and be able to have enough gas in the tank to go do stuff with your family afterwards? Well, that's very possible if we can, help improve somebody's efficiency. But certainly if they're wanting to push for time, if we can improve energy return into their body by helping their body behave more like a spring. And that's kind of an interesting concept to discuss with runners is helping you learn to run, essentially treating your body like a spring. So as your body is creating energy, you're able to absorb it and return it back to you. So you're not having to constantly recreate energy every single time your foot's hitting the ground, because that's just going to get exhausting. And so it's all about trying to, again, just help them become the most efficient version of themselves so that they can enjoy the sport, continue to do what they love to do, and do it injury-free so they can do it as long as possible.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Dr. Bret?
Oh, boy. One of the coolest things I think I've learned on the science of this is that if you improve your efficiency as a runner by 5%, and efficiency improvements come a lot from technique and form, but also from making sure your mobility and your strength are also doing their job as well. if you improve your efficiency by 5%, that equates to, according to the research, a 3.8% improvement in performance. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but any of you runners out there, take your 5K or marathon time in minutes, multiply it by 3.8%, and that'll tell you how many minutes or seconds you can take off of your time. So for a 5K runner, that equates to about 20 to 30 seconds off of their time just in efficiency. That's not even changing their fitness level. That's not changing strength or anything. That's just improving efficiency. A 20 to 30 second improvement for a 5K runner. You know how many runners you can pass in 20 to 30 seconds?
Quite a bit.
How many runners you're going to beat in 20, 30 seconds as far as if you're trying to medal in, high school, district race or trying to qualify for state, right? For cross country or track, right? I mean, that's a huge improvement. And so that's, I think, a really fun fact to realize is it doesn't take much of an improvement in your efficiency and your mechanics to give you that much more of a performance boost to whatever your goals are.
I'm Abrielle Millett for BYU-Idaho Radio, and I've been here today with Dr. Bret Maiers, and he's been talking about his 3D running gait analysis and how, that has impacted his life and also just runners in general. Thank you so much for your time. I think this
absolutely
is super exciting and important for people to know, they can be better runners.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's an underserved population in the community, and that's a big reason why I did it. Is it's a fun group of people to treat and to work with. They're super motivated, and trying to tell a runner to stop running because something hurts is like trying to tell water not to run downhill. So it's a lot of fun.